everyone, I'm Erin at Frosted Balance. One of the things I get asked a lot as a teacher is if there are any poses that will help with incontinence. After childbirth, pregnancy, or just as we age and our hormones change, our pelvic floor tends to weaken and sometimes we have problems with leakage. This is nothing to be embarrassed about. It happens to a lot of us. And I have put this sequence together today for a little bit of assistance in helping to strengthen the pelvic floor as well as increase the flexibility around the pelvic floor. We will need 2 blocks, 2 yoga blocks, doesn't matter what size they are, and possibly a folded towel, as well as a chair, or I'm going to demonstrate with my couch today. So let's get started. We're going to begin with 1 block in mountain pose. We're going to place it narrow side between the thighs, a few inches above the knees. We're going to ground down into all 4 corners of the feet and lift up tall through the head, pulling the belly button up and in and reaching our fingertips towards the floor. We're going to take a moment and notice our pelvic floor. So we're going to kind of squeeze that block as if we were trying to lift the block up to help lift the pelvic floor. If you imagine that the pelvic floor is like a hammock that holds your entire torso together, just imagine that you're lifting up your torso from your pelvis. The block helps us identify that area as well as helps engage the inner thigh muscles here. We're going to keep this engagement, lifting the pelvic floor, holding the block, and we're going to flow from mountain pose to chair pose. So we're going to inhale and sweep the arms up. And as we exhale, we're going to drop the hips down, keeping the chest open and still squeezing that block. We don't want to let the block drop. So hold on to it. Inhaling up, exhaling down. A few times moving with our breath. Sinking into the heels, keeping the chest open. And exhaling will release our block. Now that we've identified where the pelvic floor is and how to lift it, we're going to take our feet a little bit wider than hip width apart, about shoulder width apart, turning our toes out. We're going to drop the hips down and take a moment to line up the ankles over, or the knees over the ankles and toes, and drop that pelvis down. Now notice here if you have a tendency to rock the pelvis forward and arch your back, or if you have a tendency to slouch over, rocking it forward, and find that neutral position. We're going to drop it down a little bit lower and then lift that pelvic floor up. So it's almost like you're trying to squeeze your inner thighs together, trying to move your heels towards one another. So keep that movement towards the center. We're going to pull the elbows back, opening across the chest, and we're going to flow here. So we're going to inhale, reach the arms up, straighten the legs, and exhale, drop the tailbone straight down. Keep that movement squeezing towards the middle and moving with our breath. See if you can drop the tailbone down a little bit lower each time. Notice if you're keeping your pelvis in a neutral position or if you're beginning to rock it forward or backward. Good, and let's release. We're going to take both blocks now. We're going to take our feet a little bit wider with our toes pointed forward. We want to move close to our chair or couch. We're going to take the blocks long-wise, take them beneath the shoulders, and first we're going to take a moment to press through the tailbone and the top of the head, getting the spine nice and long. And then we're going to take our foot over to our chair or couch, whatever we're using here, and we're going to shift over towards that leg that is raised off the floor. Lift the pelvic floor here, and then we're going to slide over to the foot on the floor. We want to keep that lift in the pelvic floor as we slide back and forth. We're increasing that flexibility around the pelvic floor and strengthening it at the same time. Try not to lift the back side up as we slide back and forth. Let's come back to the first side and hold and breathe, pressing the top of the head and the tailbone away from each other, keeping the knee lined up over the ankles and toes. Switching back over to the other side. Coming back to center, releasing that raised leg and coming up so that we can switch sides. So either switch your chair to the other side, turn around, or I'm just going to scoot over here and use my chair, which is a rocking chair, so that's going to add a little extra work today. So take the blocks longwise beneath the shoulders, take a moment to lengthen the spine, and then shift the hips over to the raised leg, and then back to the grounded leg. Sliding back and forth. And also I want to make note that we're not really leaning into these blocks. We're just using them to elevate the height of the floor. We're holding ourselves up here with our core mostly and the strength of our legs. Let's come back to the raised leg and hold and breathe. Sliding over to the grounded leg. Keep that pelvic floor lifted. Coming back to center, releasing that leg, and coming up to standing. We'll set the blocks off to the side. We're going to take our feet about shoulder width apart, our toes pointed out. We'll inhale, take the arms up. And as we exhale, we're going to drop the tailbone straight down, coming into prayer squat. Now, if you find that your heels pop up off the floor, we can use our rolled up towel here to place our heels on. Or you can roll up the back of your mat. But we want to get comfortable so that we can let the tailbone relax and drop towards the floor, and then let the chest float open. If you imagine your tailbone is like a weight, the lower it goes, the higher your chest goes. Then we want to press the elbows into the thighs and press the thighs into the elbows. So we're opening up in the hips, relaxing the tailbone, lifting that pelvic floor up. So suck that belly button up under the ribs. Good. Let's shift forward to all fours. And then we're going to bring the feet together and the knees apart to sit back into child's pose. Now, if you find that this is uncomfortable for the knees, you can again take your rolled up towel and place them right at the back of the knees to make that a little bit more comfortable. And what we're going to do here is release the low back. As we inhale, we're going to let everything broaden and stretch. And as we exhale, we're just going to release and let everything sink. So we're going to hold our child's pose for a few breaths. Just relaxing the shoulders away from the ears. Really breathing into the lower back, imagining that as we exhale, everything sinks closer to the heels and closer to the floor. We don't have to lift the pelvic floor here, we're just letting everything relax. Let's slowly come up. And we're going to flip ourselves over. And we're going to want one block here close by. We're going to slowly roll down the mat, taking the feet in nice and close to the hip bones. We're going to take the narrow side of our block once again and place it just a few inches above the knees and squeeze it just enough to hold in place. We're going to do a few pelvic rocks. So this might not show up a whole lot, but we're going to press into the heels and press the low back towards the floor, which tilts the pelvis back and lifts the tailbone up. And then we're going to rock the tailbone down towards the floor and gently lift the low back off the mat. We're going to rock back and forth. Exhaling, pressing into the heels, and inhaling, tipping the tailbone towards the mat. A few times. Squeezing that block just enough to hold it in place, engaging the inner thighs, the muscles around the pelvic floor. And coming back to neutral, we'll move into a bridge flow. So we're going to press into the heels, press into the palms of the hand, and roll up the spine as if you were peeling your spine off the mat one vertebra at a time. And then rolling back down, trying to get the tailbone as far away from the top of the head as possible. Still holding on to that block, strengthening those inner thigh muscles. It's like that belly button in to lift the pelvic floor. Release, taking the block off to the side. We're going to bring the feet all the way together. And we're going to open the knees out to the side. Try not to let the low back pop off the floor too much. So kind of squeeze the lower abdominals right here to keep the low back down. And we're going to bring the knees in and open the knees out. So we're strengthening and stretching in a moving recline bound angle or reclining butterfly. We want to use a nice controlled motion. We don't want to just let the legs flop open. That's good. Now we're going to just come into a recline bound angle or reclining butterfly. And if you find this is really tense for the hips or uncomfortable for the knees, we can take our blocks and place them up under the thighs at whatever height feels comfortable for us so that we can just let the hips soften and open and relax. We want to just drape the legs open, letting the inner thighs gently stretch without creating new tension in the hips. So use props as you need them. Experiment with them a little. Some days your hips may be tighter than others. And let's use our three-part breath here. So let's place one hand on the belly, one hand on the chest. And as we inhale, we're going to fill the belly, fill the chest, fill the throat, and then exhale from the throat, the chest, and the belly. Just take a few breaths here, noticing the rise and fall of your hands. Continuing to release any tension in the hips that might creep back in. Softening the buttocks, relaxing the inner thighs, softening the low belly. Let's bring the knees back together. And for our last pose, we're going to do leg up the wall pose. I don't have a wall here today, so I'm just going to put my feet up on the couch. You may need your towel for this. We're going to scoot in sideways as close as we can get to the wall and then swing our legs up the wall. Now if we have really tight hamstrings and that's uncomfortable, we can take our rolled up towel and place it under the hips to take a little bit of pressure off of that tight low back and hamstrings. And just let your feet be held up by the wall. I'm just going to use my couch today. And here we just let everything relax. The hips relax, the legs just sink deep into the hip sockets. Again, letting the wall or couch hold the legs up. Just releases the low back so the pelvic floor can relax. We can take deep breaths. You can stay here for as long as you like. It's a very restful, relaxing pose. It's great to do at bedtime. And when you're ready to come out of the pose, slide your feet down the wall and roll over to one side and gently come up into a seated position. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you found this helpful. And if you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel below. And also jump on over to frostedbalance.com for more information on yoga, some healthy recipes, and balancing life.